and welcome to the Bruce channel. I'm Bruce, and I lost my own mom a few years ago. But if you were a mother, happy Mother's Day. If you're a father, you had a mother, so happy Mother's Day to her. And if you're a father, you had help becoming one, so happy Mother's Day to her. Plus, you have another month and a half, and then you get your own day. So, do we have everyone covered? Mother's, father. If you're not a mother or father, well, come on in anyway. Everybody's welcome. So, lots going on. Really a lot, but it is Mother's Day. Typically, that means Mom gets a really nice dinner, sometimes breakfast in bed. That dinner might be, maybe the kids come over and fix something nice, or maybe everybody goes out to a restaurant, but it's a good way for Mom to get the day off, right? So, despite the nice dinner, we're going to start with leftovers. I was going to show you these earlier in the spring, when we could first start speaking seriously about golf. Yeah, I know, you can talk all year long golf in South Florida, but you know, it gets a little chilly in most other places. But for a variety of reasons, it kept getting postponed. So here are first leftovers. When I golf, I generally prefer walking, but there are times when renting a cart makes sense. Now, most people do rent their carts, but there are some of those who own their own. So here, this is a leftover, but if your mother golfs, wow, wouldn't this be cool? All right, so not a leftover, but a new arrival, and its arrival was swift. Really, it's a tragedy playing out in the Alberta city of Fort McMurray. Like most of Canada, it's mostly undeveloped land. Canada is not very thickly populated. Fort McMurray is in the eastern part of the state, almost 90,000 people. It's an oil town. As late as Tuesday morning, officials were saying, yeah, go ahead and get your kits ready, but we really don't think we're going to need to evacuate. Well, the weather changed. The fire jumped over 2 rivers. The entire city has evacuated. It's the largest wildfire it's the largest evacuation because of wildfire in all of Canadian history, and it's likely to become its most expensive natural disaster. The pictures are horrifying. Some people got a few things out, what they could get in their car. Thousands and thousands got away with nothing except the cars they were driving and the clothes they were wearing. It was just like, get out now, get out now. It's possible there's nothing to go back to. You can even see the smoke from space. The fire's path was unpredictable because of the wind, so the headquarters, to fight the fire, they kept having to move it. And the fire was so fierce that they had to let almost everything burn, except they focused on saving the bridge. It's the only way into the city from the south. Not everything burned, but most of downtown did. And even if your home didn't burn, how do you go back and live there? The grocery stores are gone, the schools are gone, presumably gas stations are gone. So it's a pretty miserable situation. All right. At my press time, this other natural disaster hasn't happened yet. I hope it never does. But what I just described in Fort McMurray would be a mosquito bite by comparison. So what am I talking about? We all know about the San Andreas Fault. It is part of the Ring of Fire that essentially circles the globe along the Pacific Rim, all the way up Asia, up around northern Asia, crosses over, and then down Alaska and all the way down to South America. The recent earthquakes in Japan were because they sit on this Ring of Fire. Now, Thomas Jordan is the director of the Southern California Earthquake Center. It's at USC. They had a meeting this week. His was the keynote speech, and he said, the San Andreas Fault is locked, loaded, and ready to go. Specifically, the Pacific Plate pushes against the North American Plate. The pressure builds, and then it skips and it lets go. It moves at about 16 feet every 100 years, and when that happens suddenly, obviously. Now, we certainly know about California earthquakes, but apparently the southern San Andreas, it's not under Los Angeles, but it's near enough. The southern part of the San Andreas Fault hasn't had a big quake since 18. 57. And that was a 7.9, and that's way, way, way too long ago. The way he described it, it is a spring wound tight. So how bad would it be? Nobody knows for sure. But 8 years ago, the U.S. Geological Survey estimated that a 7.8 magnitude on the southern part of the fault would kill 1,800 people, injure 50,000 more, cause $200 billion in damages, and maybe the worst thing would be, in some areas it would be 6 months before the sewer systems ran again. That's like third world. Okay, so I was wrong. No, it's not official, but after Tuesday's Indiana primary, New Jersey and California aren't really going to count much. On Tuesday, Donald Trump won big, so big that Ted Cruz, who just days earlier said he was in until the end, quit. It's interesting how politicians talk, isn't it? Senator Cruz had been saying, if the GOP doesn't unite around me, America will fall into the abyss. His words. Well, then when he quit, he said he was never more optimistic. So which is the hyperbole? The abyss or the optimism? On last week's Meet the Press, he was asked 9 times whether or not if Donald Trump were to become the nominee, if he would back him. Asked 9 times, he answered not once. Oh, when he quit, he never mentioned Donald Trump's name. Interesting, even Donald Trump, the king of insult, he was complimentary toward Cruz when he was told the news of the senator's withdrawal. Then the next day, Wednesday, Ohio Governor John Kasich, who had also vowed to stay in until the end, he became the 16th to quit. Of course, we began with 17. So I was wrong when I predicted Donald Trump would not be the nominee. Of course, everybody else not smoking some seriously good stuff said exactly the same thing. Think back to a year ago. Trump hadn't even entered. Jeb Bush, the nominal favorite, he certainly had the most money and he had the best oiled fundraising machine. So now the thinking is, who's he going to pick for VP? There was even talk he might pick a Democrat, but he said no. But he is viewed so unfavorably by women, he almost has to pick a woman, to try and make up some of that ground. Even if asked, I don't think Carly Fiorina would accept, not from him. I mean, it's hard to imagine that she would after he insulted her looks. It's hard to imagine South Carolina Governor Nikki Haley accepting because she and Trump insulted each other after a debate. New Mexico Governor Susana Martinez might be a good choice. But then again, Governor Kasich of Ohio said he never would accept vice presidential offer from Trump. And yet someone from Ohio might be a smart move because we hear this every 4 years. No Republican has ever been elected president without winning Ohio. So, if he's to have a prayer, he's got to get Ohio, right? Through all of this, I just wonder what happened to the party of Lincoln and Dwight Eisenhower and Gerald Ford and Colin Powell, Ronald Reagan. They were guys who believed in a way of governance. But not one of them believed that, as Ted Cruz and Donald Trump seem to, that if you don't agree with them, if you have honest disagreement, you are an idiot and not worthy of another moment's thought. So it would seem our speech-making has completed its devolution. Speaker of the House, Paul Ryan, this is the highest-ranking Republican member of the U.S. government, said he wasn't ready to support Donald Trump, his party's presumptive nominee. Trump fired back, well, I'm not ready to support Paul Ryan. Sean Hannity said he wasn't ready to support Paul Ryan. Both former President Bushes, both of them said that they would not endorse Trump, and 2012 nominee Mitt Romney, he's been giving lots of speeches condemning Trump, also said he wouldn't support him. Some Republicans are so unhappy they're now said to be trying to get a third-party challenge together. And they might, but it would be suicide. For one thing, they'd want to win Texas, right? Big conservative state, lots of electoral votes. To get on the ballot in November, they need a petition signed by 79,000 voters, 79,000 voters who did not vote in Texas's primary in March. And the deadline for this petition is Monday, May the 9th. So On the other side, Hillary has not clinched yet. It is hard to imagine that she doesn't wrap it up. She has such a lead over Bernie, but geography and calendar suggest Bernie may yet do well in May. But still, unless lightning strikes, however it plays out, it's going to be historic. We're going to set some kind of first. The first neophyte, the first woman, the first Jew. From here in May, though, it sure does seem that come November, we'll elect the first something.
Hey, let me tell you about my book, Shrink. For most of my adult life, I weighed a little over 100 pounds. Not much more than in this picture taken when I was about 17 and considering becoming a jockey. But as is often true, once I crossed into my 40s, extra weight came and it stayed. For years I tried to lose, instead gained, and ended up 153 pounds. And I'm embarrassed to show you this video. Then I learned that it isn't about calories and exercise, but instead it's about what you eat. You might say, sure, ice cream makes you fat. But there were surprises, things like orange juice not being such a wise choice if you're trying to lose weight. So I just made some basic changes to what I ate, not how much, and the weight just fell off. Now, nearly 3 years later, it is still off. And don't misunderstand, I'm eating foods I like, not bamboo shoots. Friends ask me how I did it so often, I put it in a book. It's available as an ebook for all platforms, and the print edition is available at barnesandnoble.com and amazon.com. Hey, you can shrink too.
So welcome back. Remember, you can watch all of our previous episodes at tinyurl.com/Bruce Channel or at our Facebook page, The Bruce Channel. And you can write to us at thebrucechannel@yahoo.com. So, yes, it's been an eventful week, and in ways other than political. It was Teacher Appreciation Day, actually week, but the significant day was Tuesday, the 3rd. The next day, you probably heard this, was May the 4th be with you day. That was Wednesday. And of course, the next day then was Revenge of the 5th. Of course, for a lot longer than the Revenge of the 5th, it's been known as Cinco de Mayo. And although my deadline prohibits me from knowing the winner of the Kentucky Derby, that's the first Saturday in May, so for the next 2 weeks, we'll all be wondering whether or not a Triple Crown winner will happen this year, as did last year, the first time in 37 years. And of course, I reminded you last week that the first Saturday in May is also World Naked Gardening Day. No, I am not obsessed with it. But I don't think it's widely known enough, so I'm just doing my bit to help out. Oh, and while Wednesday was May the 4th, may the 4th be with you, 5-4 might also be known as Dave Brubeck Day. Okay, I've spoken of the book I've been reading about President George H.W. Bush, and I am nearing the end. There are things that I will tell you about it after completing it, but this week I was reading the time during the fall of the Berlin Wall when he was president, and it made me realize why I so ardently believe that a Carly Fiorina or a Ben Carson, and yes, Donald Trump, strike me as unimaginable as president. Without the requisite time being exposed to international diplomatic relations, and I'm not talking about just meeting with world leaders, but diplomatic relations. I'm reminded of Richard Nixon and his dealings with Leonid Brezhnev, and John Kennedy during the Cuban Missile Crisis dealing with Nikita Khrushchev. You know, subtle choices of words and phrases and back-channel dealings. So during the fall of the Berlin Wall, President Bush spoke with Mikhail Gorbachev. It was artful, letting him know, we don't want you to go in, but we understand the position you're in. We may say a few things for public consumption. Understand that's politics, and it's artful. I remember Fiorina saying, "Push it up under Putin's nose." Well, I don't think that's a safe thing to do. And of course, Mikhail Gorbachev, Historically, the Soviets had sent tanks into Hungary, into Czechoslovakia, into Poland, but without the belligerents, he didn't feel threatened. Any world leader, if challenged openly and belligerently, has to respond. So there's a subtlety to the negotiation. Anyway, reading that book reminded me of that, and then gave birth to this thought. We haven't done it in quite a while, but this wouldn't be like writing to a film star. I think we ought to send thanks to President Jimmy Carter. The Mideast remains a powder keg, but Egypt and Israel haven't been at war in years, and that was thanks to his efforts at the Camp David Accords. His mailing address, President Jimmy Carter, 209 Woodland Drive, Plains, Georgia, 31780. That's his street address. He's so unassuming. All right. We ought to send a thanks to President George H.W. Bush, because his handling during the fall of the Berlin Wall, and also thinking of Tiananmen Square. So his address would be President George H.W. Bush. That's the office of the Honorable George Bush, 10,000 Memorial Drive, Suite 900, Houston, Texas, 77024. And while we're on it, I think for not following his predecessor's protocol, for having the enormous courage to stand up to his own country's military hawks, and helping make the world, I think, a hell of a lot safer than it would have been had he acted differently, we ought to thank a sincere thank you to Mikhail Gorbachev. And he can be mailed at the Gorbachev Foundation, 39 Leningradsky Prospect, Building 14, Moscow, 12516, Russia. And if you'd rather phone or send a fax, here are those numbers. Personally, I'm not going to call, all right. For one thing, I don't speak Russian. I think he does speak a little English, but I doubt that he answers his own phone. And if it did require some Russian, all of the Russian I know, I learned from Hogan's Heroes. Da, нет.
The next two words are da and yet, meaning yes and no. Now, let me hear you say yes and no in Russian. Da, нет. Da, нет. Da, нет.
All right, got some wonderful vids here. Last week I showed you the one with the animals helping out their buddies. Here's one where the help is more familial than friendly. Okay, and this one is almost breathtaking. I saw something similar to this once. I hope to find it and show it to you sometime. But this lesson in perspective is no less than, I think amazing is the word. All right, finally, this past week, I had one of the most unusual experiences of my life. Actually, in my life, I think it would be correct to say it was unique. And it may not be a stretch to say unique in any of your lives. It's even possible I had an experience singularly unique to any human being. Or not. The thing is, were there a simple explanation, I should have been able to find it, right? I mean, the internet, Google. if I drop a raw egg on your car in the heat of summer, I may never have before experienced it, and maybe should have known better, but didn't, that it would ruin the paint. Well, that might be unique to me, but I could Google it and then learn that, yeah, well, don't do that, because that's, of course, what happens. Well, I had this experience. I have Googled, I have asked people, I have found nothing. All right, so remember, back when it was winter and still cold, I told you a brutally cold Sunday morning, getting down to the lower teens, and I worried that a calico cat that had been hanging around would starve or freeze or both, and I opened some tuna, I fed it, I did that for several days, and I have continued feeding said calico cat. It's now cat food that I feed her. She wasn't a feral cat, she was very friendly, we have bonded, and a friend who is a cat person told me, well, you know, that may be, stay away from the bellies. Cats don't like that. This calico cat lies on her back, splays her legs, and invites me to rub her belly like my dog Katie does. So we bonded. And yeah, amazingly, Katie is rather indifferent. She barks like crazy at other cats, but not this calico cat, whom she now recognizes. All right, so that's the background. Now, both when I was in Charleston and 2 weeks ago when I went to Milwaukee, a friend of mine here did me the favor of putting out the food and water for the calico cat while I was away. So this last time when I got back, she suggested that, you know, maybe put some vinegar around the food to better repel ants. Good idea. So I began doing that. I put some vinegar in a saucer, and then the food, the bowl with the food in it, I would put in the saucer. Then on Monday or Tuesday morning this week, I went out, it was like dawn, so I turned on the light and I looked down and I saw that the bowl was empty. This bowl was empty, okay? And I reached to pick it up and it came apart. You can see it is not perfectly round, but it is a clean cut. I was going to bring it inside, wash it off. Instead, I picked it up. So, I don't know, maybe this is the new crop circles. I don't know. I've Googled vinegar cutting glass and things like that, but isn't a vessel like this supposed to hold vinegar or milk or any other liquid? Yeah. So maybe it is the new crop circles. Or not. I don't know. But it is weird. So watch out. See if you... Let me know if this is happening by you, if this is spreading. Maybe it's Day of the Triffids. Anyway. The Chinese would say, may you live in interesting times, given the election results and this. I think we've got that covered. So instead, I'll simply wish that your upcoming week is the best one you've ever had. Woo-hoo.